Thank you for joining us today at our Advanced Tips for Protecting Your Data workshop.
You can scan the QR code or click the link that we're going to put in the chat to access a text-based version of this presentation. The text-based version is more screen reader accessible, and you can also save a copy for yourself to keep the links for future reference.
So who are we? My name is Inbar. I am the Research and Instructional Librarian for the Humanities and Arts. You can contact me at inbar.michael@etamu.edu.
And I'm Zephyr Rankin, and I'm the Research and Instruction Librarian for the College of Science and Engineering and the College of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources. And you can email me at zephyr.rankin@etamu.edu. And you can contact all of the Research and Instruction Librarians using our Ask a Librarian form. The URL for that is etamu.edu/askwaters. In this presentation, we're going to cover tips for reading a terms of use document, age verification policies and how they impact your privacy and data security, data obfuscation, including how online platforms can obfuscate data for security purposes and how you can obfuscate your own data for privacy purposes, virtual private networks or VPNs, and how privacy and artificial intelligence, particularly generative artificial intelligence, intersect.
Let's break down what a terms of use document is and how to read it. What is a terms of use document? You might have seen this document before, often when you are creating accounts online for different services. According to the International Encyclopedia of Digital Communication and Society, terms of use documents are contracts users commit themselves to when clicking the agree button upon accessing social media platforms, internet service providers, web applications and sites, and when first using many forms of software. Within these contracts lie important legally binding detail about the rights and responsibilities of the users and service providers. Terms of use documents are often long and very overwhelming to read, both in their length and in the language that is employed. It is not feasible to read through every single terms of use document that you come across. However, there are some sections that you can focus on to efficiently read through the most significant parts that pertain to your privacy and security. We recommend fully reading through the privacy policy, which is now sometimes its own separate document, and specifically the section that is often within the privacy policy that discusses how your data is used. The privacy policy covers how the service will collect, process, utilize, and save your data. Within this, there will be a section on how your data is used, which covers how the service will use your data, what data they will use, the restrictions they have on what they share with third parties, etc. This is important to read because it will highlight what data is being collected on you and how the company plans to use it or sell it, often to develop a profile of you so they can send you more targeted advertisements. Sometimes there will also be a section within the privacy policy for you to opt out of certain data collections, which is why it is always good to read this section. Within the last few years, we have seen some services begin to require age verification or hint at future requirements of age verification in order to utilize the service. This poses some privacy concerns, which we will discuss. What does it mean when you are asked to verify your age? Age verification is when you're asked to provide proof of your age in order to access a service or to ensure that you are being provided with age-appropriate content. Methods of verifying age include uploading your ID and a photo of yourself, or utilizing a facial recognition program to scan your face that determines an estimate of your age. Here are some examples of services that already require one's age to be verified in order to use their site or will require it in the near future. Discord. Earlier this year, Discord implemented age verification in the UK in response to their Online Safety Act, which aims to protect minors online. Thus, either IDs or facial age estimation technology can be utilized to prove one's age. Despite privacy efforts, some of this information was hacked and shared online. This included images of people holding up their IDs next to their face, emails, and addresses. Apple and Google. Both Apple and Google conceded to Texas's age verification law that will begin starting on January 1st of 2026. This law essentially requires age verification in app stores and for app developers in an effort to increase internet safety for minors. However, concern has been raised over the collection of such data, as it is unclear how this data is being stored and used in its fullest extent. So, what happens if you're required to verify your age on an application? There are a couple things to consider. Is there an alternative to this website that does not require age verification? If so, go with this alternative. That way you can just bypass the whole process of providing more sensitive information about yourself. If there is no alternative, how are they requiring you to provide proof of age? For example, if they want a copy of your ID, provide that and nothing else. They might ask for other additional information, but if it is not required, don't provide it. Less is more.
Now let's talk a little bit about data obfuscation, starting with what is data obfuscation. Primarily, data obfuscation is the process of hiding or disguising data or personally identifiable information in order to increase privacy and security. You will most often see this term used to refer to the process of online platforms storing obfuscated data instead of unedited data in order to improve their security practices. However, users can also obfuscate their own data when using the internet. This term has also been used to refer to a different process in which bad or nonsense data is intentionally added to a harmful data set in order to obscure the useful data. We'll talk about all of these definitions as well as some use cases in the next few slides. As I said previously, the primary definition of data obfuscation refers to obscuring data on the server side of a web platform. This is a very important security practice as it means that if there is a data breach, the leaked data is not legible or usable. There are several different techniques that services can utilize for server-side data obfuscation. Some are more common than others, and the list on this slide is non-exhaustive. Many of the methods used are chosen because they allow the data to continue to be stored in a usable format. Others, like nulling, are more secure but are no longer usable, so they don't work for all types of data. We talked a lot about end-to-end encryption in part 1 of the Data Privacy Workshop series. In this case, we're talking about the base method, just encryption. This involves putting the data in a sort of code that requires the decryption key to decode. In the event of a breach, if someone gains possession of the data, they are completely unable to do anything with it without that decryption key. Various types of masking may also be used. In data masking, the data is retained in its original format but is blocked out or changed somehow in order to minimize its usefulness to anyone without the necessary information to demask it. In some cases, the information is so blocked out that there's almost no risk, such as a system that replaces all but the last 4 digits of a credit card number with asterisks. In other cases, the data could become usable if someone had the necessary tools to make it so, such as in the case of a dataset of birth dates that are time-shifted. In this case, none of the birth dates are stored as the correct date, but if someone knows how much they are time-shifted and in which direction, they could undo the mask and make the data usable again. Anonymization and de-identification are methods of storing data without tying it to anyone's personally identifiable information. This can be done through aggregation, only storing and using the data when it has been compiled with other people's collected data so that it isn't building a profile on a single person. For example, a company could know that 40% of their user base is in their 20s and also know that 60% of their user base is female without knowing the demographic information about a specific user. This can also be done through partial nulling, in which case any identifiable information is removed from the dataset completely. While server-side data obfuscation is a good security tool, you can also protect your information even better by obfuscating your own data. This is more privacy-focused than security-focused. Just as a reminder, privacy is about giving people the agency to decide when and how much information they want to share about themselves. By obfuscating your own data, you're not relying on the security practices of an online service because even that service doesn't have your sensitive information. Obfuscating your own data won't always be an option, of course. If you are ordering something online, for example, you'll have to provide your actual name and address in order to receive the item. However, in many cases, it's perfectly acceptable to simply lie. A good example is usernames. Using a username unrelated to your real name is a very good way to protect your privacy, especially if your name is relatively uncommon in your location. Someone named John might be able to get away with using their first name in their username, but for example, Inbar and Zephyr are both very distinct names. Pairing even a little bit of extra information like an age and a general location with one of our names would make it very easy for someone to identify us. You can also make up a fake birthday, not really to lie about your age, page, but to make it more difficult to tie your digital footprint back to you. If you decide to go this route, make sure you can remember what you made up. In addition to making up your own information, there are also services that allow you to mask some of your information, in particular email addresses, phone numbers, and credit card numbers that can enhance online safety. And finally, using a VPN can help you protect yourself online by hiding some of the information about your computer that you aren't necessarily intentionally telling the sites you visit. We'll cover email masks a little more in depth on the next slide, and VPNs have their own section later on. Many email services have the ability to create email masks that allow you to shield your email address when you put it into an online service. As with all methods of withholding your data, you'll want to ensure that you won't need to answer any emails from the provided email address before using a mask. Email masks allow you to receive emails to your inbox, but they're not a true email address. If you will need to be able to send and receive emails, but don't want someone to know your true email address, the one connected to your email account that you use to log in, then you can use an email alias instead. Usually the number of aliases you can create is more limited than the number of masks. There are two benefits to using masks, especially in the event of data leaks or data breaches. The most obvious is that your true email address would not be part of the compromised information. While a scammer might be able to contact you through the email mask, no one will be able to attempt to log into your email account. The second is that if you use a different email mask for each service, then if a scammer does try to reach you after getting your information in a leak, or if a company sold your data, then you know exactly which service the leak came from. This means that you can change your password or even delete your information from that service and stop using it. The other definition that you may occasionally hear for data obfuscation involves intentionally messing with data collection in order to introduce bad data into the dataset. This serves to obfuscate information in a dataset that is explicitly harmful or anti-privacy in order to protect yourself and others. I have also heard this called data mischief in some circles, but because data mischief is also a cybercrime, it's best not to conflate the meanings for that term. One example of where this method is used is in advertising surveys meant to collect data to improve targeted advertising. These surveys may occasionally appear on platforms that serve targeted ads in place of an actual ad. And now let's talk a little bit about virtual private networks, or VPNs. A VPN is a virtual network, which is a network of computers that are connected to each other in a way other than physical, that serves to protect the information that is shared between computers on the network. Using a VPN can hide certain information about your computer, such as your location or your IP address, from the sites that you visit. VPNs also offer a safer method of browsing the web when you need to use public Wi-Fi because your activity is routed through the private network and is shielded from other computers on the same Wi-Fi network. As with every service, make sure you are familiar with the terms of use for a VPN before you decide to use it. It's also a good idea to do a little bit of research on the organization that hosts the VPN. A lot of VPNs are owned by the same companies but operate under different names, and some are not very trustworthy. Once you have decided on a VPN, check all of the settings and the location options. There may be a variety of settings that increase your security while browsing the internet, but many of those come with the trade-off of reduced connection speed.
Now we're going to talk more about generative AI and the data privacy concerns that come with utilizing it. Before jumping into the other areas of data privacy in relation to AI, we just wanted to give a quick reminder to read the terms of use document, especially the privacy policy section. As with the proliferation of AI, it is being integrated into many services. This includes the utilization of it for data collection, which is highlighted in the privacy policy. There's usually a way to opt out of AI data collection, which is then used to train the AI, but it is not easy to locate and is usually within the privacy policy. The way that generative AI generates outputs through its algorithms and calculations is often not transparent. Additionally, it is not always clear on what the generative AI was trained on, and whether or not it is continuing to collect data to further train the model on the types of outputs it provides. When this is the case, it is known as a black box model.
Building on the theme of transparency, it's also important to be aware of the practice of deceptive AI. This is sometimes called human in the loop. There have been several cases of AI tools that claim to be automated, but are actually partially or completely run by human workers. These workers are often low-income, invisible labor in historically exploited countries, although that's not always the case. For one example, it was recently discovered that the co-founders of an AI meeting notes tool called Fireflies was not actually using AI when it was first developed, but Instead, one of the two founders was calling into people's Zoom meetings and silently taking their own notes, which they would then send to the person who subscribed to the quote-unquote AI tool. There have been a few examples of this practice in the last few years, and it has some interesting privacy implications, as many people may feel comfortable sharing their data with a supposedly anonymous AI tool when they wouldn't necessarily feel the same about another person. It's important to note that privacy in a generative AI tool has a couple of different layers to consider. For text generators like GPT, the interface for the generator is set up as a chatbot. The large language model that powers the text generator and the chatbot interface are actually two different pieces of technology, so you need to be aware of how privacy plays a role in both pieces. Training data is the giant collection of information, mostly compiled by scraping the internet, that is used in the training of the large language model or LLM. When people voice concerns about social media posts, copyrighted materials, and other scraped data, their concern is about that information in the training data. The LLM uses all of this data to recognize patterns and learn how human text looks so they can understand and replicate it. The information you share with a chatbot, on the other hand, is part of the bot. It's not used to train the underlying LLM, but it is used to help train the bot to learn what kind of responses people like. However, many chatbot services retain the chat data, and if the option isn't turned off in the settings, and it's usually turned on by default, then they do have permission to put chat data into the training data. Because training an LLM is done all at once, the chat data would be used to train the next model, not the one you're currently using. Additionally, even when the chat data isn't added to the training data for the next model, and even when it is deleted by the user, it is still retained on the platform's servers for a specific amount of time for legal reasons. The amount of time that data is retained varies by service, but usually is at least 30 days.
Generative AI has exploded in a variety of services, from ChatGPT to Sora OpenAI to Character.ai to the Friend AI device. There has been increasing concern as to how these generative AI services collect and use data. For example, with the Friend AI device, it is constantly listening in order to provide feedback fitted to the person that is utilizing the device. However, this means that this device is also listening in on conversations with other people who may or may not consent to being recorded. Additionally, generative AI, like Character.ai, is sycophantic, meaning that it's going to say things to you that are agreeable in order for you to continue using it and investing your time and money in it. A part of this sycophancy is that companies that own these generative AIs want to turn a profit. Thus, they want people to keep utilizing the service so the company can develop profiles on people and then produce targeted advertising. Furthermore, this has resulted in people taking on more hours of work so that they can continue paying for their AI companion. Finally, there is a lack of regulation and accountability when it comes to data usage and retention by AI.
The links to all references and resources are available in the text-based outline linked in the chat. Thank you for joining us. As a reminder, you can send questions to all librarians using the Ask a Librarian form at etamu.edu/askwaters, and you can email Inbar or me at inbar.michael@etamu.edu or zephyr.rankin@etamu.edu.